Welcome to PoliTalk English. Ready to improve your English with real-world stories? Here, we learn English through simple, clear, and interesting stories about news and politics. Listen, relax, and enjoy your PoliTalk journey.
Chapter 1: The Beginning and a Tense Atmosphere. There was a meeting on Capitol Hill. It was very tense. Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett suddenly stood up from her chair. Barrett had always been a calm person, but this time she was very excited. Across the table sat Caroline Levitt from the White House. Caroline had a file in her hand. This file contained documents showing that Barrett's actions and statements over the past 3 years differed from what she had told the public. The meeting started out as a routine one. However, when Caroline presented evidence suggesting that Barrett had coordinated some of her judicial decisions with political figures outside the court, the tone shifted dramatically. This incident was highly significant because it called into question the independence of the highest court. Everyone saw that even the highest judges could be held accountable if they made mistakes. The debate at the meeting revealed the answer to the question: is adhering to the Constitution more important, or is being a judge? In the end, the truth and evidence prevailed. Before continuing, please write in the comments which city you are in and subscribe to our channel to stay updated on new constitutional news. Chapter 2: The Development of the Investigation and Evidence. How did this incident begin? Because Congress was investigating whether some judges had been communicating with political figures outside the court. A tip was received. The tip alleged that some judges had been receiving information from outside sources in important cases. At first, only lower courts were investigated. However, when emails, phone calls, and meeting records were examined, it became clear that the matter extended all the way to the highest court. The evidence that led to Barrett and Levitt facing off was found through a careful review of conversations and correspondence gathered over 3 years. Researchers found that Barrett had spoken with some conservative individuals via email and phone before making important decisions. These conversations were not illegal. However, this raised questions in people's minds about whether Barrett was impartial. If a judge makes decisions alongside political figures, it violates a fundamental principle of the United States: the separation of powers. Courts must be independent and free from political influence. For the public to trust the justice system, court decisions must be based solely on the law. Congress initially sought to resolve this issue through private discussions with the Supreme Court. However, Chief Justice Roberts stated, "We are independent. I will not participate in these discussions." In response, Congress decided to discuss the matter publicly and transparently. The meeting between Barrett and Levitt was actually a routine oversight hearing. However, Levitt was well prepared and thoroughly reviewed all the evidence he had gathered. His findings turned the meeting from a routine session into a major constitutional crisis. Chapter 3: Conflict, Outcome, and Lessons. The meeting room was very crowded. Barrett arrived with security guards and lawyers and sat down at the table. Everyone was wondering what he would say. Barrett's speech was very impressive. He spoke about judicial independence and the Constitution. His presentation was very organized and professional. This was because Barrett had gained years of experience in this field. The first questions were asked by members of Congress. Republicans defended Barrett. Democrats expressed their concerns about ethics and transparency. Barrett easily answered these questions by giving examples from legal rules and the Constitution. But then Caroline Levitt took the podium to speak. Others were speaking in general terms, but Levitt had come with very specific and important evidence. She questioned Barrett's statements about judicial independence. Levitt began her speech by agreeing that judges must be independent. But she said that it is the duty of the state to ensure that all state employees, including judges, act in accordance with the rules and ethical values. Levitt's voice was calm but firm. The first piece of evidence Levitt presented was email correspondence between Barrett and Leonard Leo, an important conservative activist. These emails contained detailed discussions about cases and strategies. It is not appropriate for a judge to engage in such conversations. Barrett immediately went on the defensive. I can talk to other lawyers. That's normal. The emails are being misinterpreted, she said. But Levitt presented other evidence showing that Barrett was not just consulting, but actively planning with certain individuals. The next pieces of evidence were phone calls. These recordings showed that Barrett spoke with certain individuals immediately before and after making important decisions. This was not a coincidence. It showed that there was a plan. As Levitt presented each piece of evidence, Barrett became more and more defensive, and his answers became shorter and more defensive. His initial confidence was gone. He was now arguing over procedure and not fully addressing the issues. The next major piece of evidence was that Barrett had attended some secret meetings. These meetings were about cases that had not yet been decided by the Supreme Court. Barrett had actively participated in these meetings. The meeting notes clearly outlined case strategies and what needed to be done. This is something a judge should not do. Finally, Levitt played audio recordings of secret meetings between Barrett and some political figures. These recordings showed that Barrett made court decisions based on political desires rather than legal principles. When Barrett responded to these audio recordings, she became completely angry. Instead of responding to the evidence, she began criticizing Congress's right to question her. The final piece of evidence concerned Barrett receiving money from certain organizations and hearing cases involving those organizations in court. This raised questions about Barrett's impartiality. Barrett became very emotional in her response, focusing on technical details rather than the ethical implications. Finally, Caroline Levitt opened a very important envelope. This envelope contained internal communications from some people working at the court. The communications suggested that Barrett and her aides were writing decisions based on political requests from outside sources. In one email, Barrett clearly stated, My job is not to work for the Constitution, but to work for conservative political goals. This directly contradicted everything Barrett had told the public. Upon seeing these documents, Barrett abruptly stood up and declared, "This is a political attack. I will not continue." She left the meeting. This was an unprecedented action for a judge. It was the first time such an incident had occurred in history. Court security personnel and members of Congress were stunned. After Barrett left, Levitt continued his speech and presented all the evidence he had, piece by piece. He stated that there were financial and political connections in the court and in Barrett's decisions, and that this violated ethical rules. Congress immediately launched an investigation following this incident. Both Democrats and Republicans acknowledged that Barrett's behavior posed a significant constitutional issue. New laws were enacted, and stricter ethical guidelines were imposed on the Supreme Court. As a result, Barrett was removed from office. Everyone understood that even those in the highest positions are held accountable for breaking the rules. Barrett's case became a textbook example in schools. Everyone saw that justice and ethical standards are more important than politics and power. Finally, transparency and proper governance are of utmost importance. Barrett's mistakes served as a lesson for everyone. Thanks to Caroline Levitt's determined and consistent efforts, the truth came to light, and justice was served.